Welcome to Did You Know, a podcast to discuss everything through a Jewish lens. Now, please help me welcome someone whose mother recently added to her list of top 10 favorite podcasters, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to Did You Know? I'm one of your hosts, Jonathan Rosen, and today I'm thrilled to welcome an award-winning author of such books as Alice in Wonderland, which I still consider a great title, Swimming with Sharks, This Is Not the Abby Show. She also has a story in the Jewish anthology Coming of Age, 13 B'nai Mitzvah Stories. She's also a former TV and film agent, and most importantly to me is that she's a good friend of mine. Please help me welcome Debbie Reed Fischer. Debbie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. And am I the very first host?
Very first guest.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. The very first one. So, it can only go downhill from here, but we'll see.
I'm so honored. I'm so honored. Thank you.
Well, you and I have known each other for a long time, but we never really got to discuss our past, really. I know some details, but I'm looking forward to finding out more. So we have some similarities. We moved around a lot, and you grew up in a military family. So what was that like moving around all the time?
It was something I didn't even think about because, especially when I was younger and we lived on the base in England, that's really where my first memories were formed. Everyone around us was in the same situation. It was very peripatetic. Everybody was moving all the time. It wasn't until I came to the States later and we were sort of assimilated with the general population that I realized, people really don't understand my language sometimes. When I would say, I really like being here in the States, they would say, you mean America? We never used the expression America. It was either the States or wherever you were stationed. But I moved to England, Greece, DC, Florida twice, Virginia, all over.
It's funny because I moved around a lot too, and it's like, but when my experience was different, that everyone always used to say America. No one ever said the States. Everyone said America in the other countries. That's how they referred to it as.
Yeah, that's it. You're a civilian.
Okay, that's true. Okay.
Yeah. And actually the word brat, a lot of people don't know this. It's an acronym, and we took it from the British when the RAF were being stationed in other places. It said on their paperwork, British Regiment Attached Transfer for the children, BRAT. They were like luggage, attached transfer.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And then, and then the Americans took that, and I've heard born, raised, and transferred, and also born, raised, and trained. Because, it's a tongue in cheek because we're not brats. We're quite the opposite. We're very well-behaved children.
Well, yeah, that I could believe. How was it moving around though for you? I mean, were you upset like having to move all the time, like, making friends, leaving friends? And how were you treated as, not other countries like to American kids sometimes?
Well, what's interesting is you didn't have to move to have to make new friends every year because either your friend moved or you did. So a lot of times I'd be still stationed in the same place. Like in Greece, for example, I had to find a new best friend every single year. I was the kind of kid that had the one best friend. I didn't run with a pack, kind of. But the nice thing is, at least in Greece, I can tell you, we're still very, very bonded. I just this past weekend spoke to my best friend from 10th grade that we always kept in touch with in Greece. And we still all see each other. If I'm traveling somewhere where my friends in Greece lived, I always look them up and we get together. And in fact, my son is he's in South Korea right now, just on vacation. And one of my high school friends lives there. So I just feel a lot better knowing she would be there for him in a second, even though I haven't seen her in many years. It was that kind of bond because we were Americans in a place that at the time hated Americans.
Right.
Really hated. I use that word.
I've experienced that aspect as well.
With conviction.
But, yeah.
And whenever they hate Americans, they hate Jews.
That was my next question. I wanted to know, what was it growing up as a Jew in a lot of these places? I mean, well, you were in Israel too. I mean, I lived in Israel, so that part wasn't an aspect, but I've been in places where there were definitely problems because I was Jewish.
Yes, because they conflate, wherever you see them burning an American flag, you will see them burning an Israeli flag. They conflate things together, and Jews are always the problem. So, it was It's interesting. I was just thinking about this recently also, because some of the anti-Semitism, I was just explaining to a friend of mine, whenever someone tries to convert you, it's anti-Semitism,
Yeah.
even if they're doing it because they like you and you're a close friend. The point is they are erasing, the goal is to erase your faith and to erase you as a people. They want to convert you.
Yeah.
So that was really the number one battle that I faced. There's this really insidious organization called Young Life, that it's in middle schools and high schools. And they literally use candy to lure kids. Oh, we're going to be having, games and popcorn and pizza and candy and whatever it is. And then the next thing you know, they're talking to you about, their faith and why you should convert. And
I didn't even know this
those
organization.
were the main battles. And it was a lot of people. I mean, occasionally, sure, I got called names, or they threw in Virginia, which was right outside of DC. This was not rural Virginia. This was a suburb of Washington, DC. I remember kids throwing change at me on the bus to see if we could pick it up. You need some new material, anti-Semite.
Yeah, exactly.
That one's stale.
Right.
Wasn't even funny the first time.
Almost
again,
every.
things like that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. So it was. I mean, sometimes there was overt, sure, I heard names being called, or pick up the chain, or Jews are cheap, or Jews are this or that. But the main thing that was really tough was when it came from friends who were trying to convert me. That was because it's because they like you and they're worried about your soul, and and I would have to explain, well, but we don't even believe in hell, so I'm not worried. I'm not as worried as you are. I'm good.
Well, no, it's funny that you mentioned with friends, because that's been my experiences. But first of all, going back, I'm not a fighter. I don't believe in violence. I don't fight. Yet I've been in a lot of fights in my life, and just about every time it's because I was Jewish. So standing up for yourself. And but friends too, shock you. You could just be really close friends with somebody, and then all of a sudden they throw out the expression, "Oh, I had to Jew him down." Just talking about, and what? Just don't, and they don't even realize what they've done wrong with it.
Right. And the funny thing is, so you and I have known each other a very long time. Yes. And I know that you have family from Mexico.
Yeah.
And of course, my mother was born and raised in Cuba before having to leave Lithuania, my grandma. I've never experienced, other than the occasional use of the word spick or oye or whatever, I've never had anything to the point where I would be super offended about my Cuban relative. A lot of times I might roll my eyes like, that's so ignorant. People might say things that are very ignorant about, Cubans or being from Cuba. But the worst hate I've ever received has been because of being Jewish. So, but evidently we are, we're not really anybody to be too concerned about in this diversity movement.
We're going to get to that, believe me. So yes, well, let's talk about writing. We'll come back to this. So when did you first start showing an interest in writing?
Oh my goodness, I can't remember ever wanting to not write. In fact, I was in a newspaper when I was 10 years old in England for a poem that I had written, and I just always. Even then, I remember telling the reporter, it was just a local village newspaper in rural England where we lived. And I remember telling the reporter, no, I'm going to write books someday. And the other thing is, I remember very clearly the very first Judy Blume book that I ever read. And I had this feeling, I don't know if you've ever experienced this. It was like a deja vu, but it hadn't happened yet. I had this feeling like it was almost, I've been here before, I've done this, I know I can do this. Yeah, I knew that not only that I wanted to write books, but that I wanted to write for kids. And that never went away. Yeah.
Well, I was going to bring this up later, but since you mentioned it now, growing up, you had that feeling with the Judy Blume book. You got to interview Judy Blume. But how was that, for your fascination as a kid, that was one of your first interests in books, was her, and then getting to interview her? What was that like? How did that come about?
Well, this sounds bananas. This is going to sound like I'm making it up, but I always knew I would interview Judy Blume or meet her or get to know her or something. It was a feeling that I had. I can't explain it. It doesn't make sense. It sounds crazy. And no, we're not best friends. We're not. She's not my BFF. But, you know, we have been in communication at other times. In fact, even after I interviewed her, I sent her an email to see if she could come and speak to the Stoneman Douglas kids, the Parkland shooting kids,
Okay.
because I had organized along with Diana, the librarian there, and
Right.
Carrie Sarah, who you know, Carrie O'Malley Sarah, and we put together a wonderful literary festival where authors came in on their own dime. You did as well.
Yes, I was there.
Yes, to talk to the kids. Anyway, so Judy Blume was going to do it, but unfortunately she was in Italy and she was worried about doing a Zoom because of technical problems and things like that. So I always knew that I would have some sort of meeting or something with her, and you know, it
Were you
worked out.
nervous?
Yes.
Yes.
I wouldn't have been nervous, but I'll tell you what. I was super, super prepared. So I went into it having read everything I could read about her. I had my index cards, and I figured, you know, I knew that once I got on the stage, I would relax. But here's what happened. There was a lady who was involved in putting it together. She was not happy that I had been chosen to interview Judy
Really?
Blume. She felt it should have been her. And she also claimed that she and Judy were great friends before Judy was famous, when she was a young woman in a suburb of New York City. She came backstage in the green room when we were getting ready to go out. And this is inside scoop. This is Hollywood gossip, except Boca Raton. And she
So this
came
is an
back.
exclusive for here. Good. Okay.
An
Yes.
exclusive. You're getting it first.
Yes.
And she marched in with her hands. I don't know if you can see on my weird screen, with this big like, ta-da, I'm here, Judy. Judy had no idea who she was. And by the way, this is not Lashon Hara, because I'm not mentioning the name of the person. Apparently,
rhymes with.
no, I'm not even going to do that. I'm not, but it's, yeah, so this is not Lashon Hara. That's my loophole.
Right.
And after that happened, she literally shouldered me
Wow.
out of the way and was so incredibly rude that Judy looked at me. Who is this person? Who is this lady? Who was going out of her way to be incredibly unkind. So by the time I went out on stage, I was shook.
Oh,
really,
wow.
really shook. But you know what? It was a lesson to me that I could get through it. You know, the show must go on.
Mhm.
And Judy was a pro. And I shook it off and I laughed, and we got lots of applause and everybody loved it. And there was a huge signing afterwards, and it was fantastic. And only I knew that I was completely shook on the inside, but I didn't show anything on the outside.
That's well, good for you, but how awful. This is really the pettiness involved in that.
Right, exactly. Well, you know what? This is what I said to myself. Something must have happened to this person to make them that way.
Mhm.
I wonder what happened in their life. Maybe I should just pity them, because why would you purposely try to throw someone off their game? And in fact, this person introduced me to the audience and then walked out, didn't stay for the interview at all. So
I kind of love it. I really do. I really kind of love it. It just
I kind of love it too now. Looking back, I kind of love it also.
and really extremely petty. I want to talk a little bit about, you were also involved, this part's fascinating to me, and I've never discussed this with you. You were involved in TV and film and agency for that. How did you get involved with that? And what was that life like?
Oh, wow. Well, so that was, I have to plug, even though it's out of print.
Okay.
I don't know if you can
Well,
see.
the Braless in Wonderland, yes. Great
Yeah,
title.
it was-
I'll ask you about how that title came about also, but let's talk
Yeah,
about how you got involved.
That title is another story. Okay, so the Braless in Wonderland, that was the material for that book came from my job as a model booker and a TV and film agent. What happened was I was studying film at the University of Miami, as well as Judaic studies with a minor in English.
Mhm.
One of those degrees that everyone said, you're never going to find work. And I actually found work in every single one of my degrees.
Okay.
Yeah. And my advisor, who I realize now changed the course of my life and was the most amazing person. A lot of people, I realize now, were not as lucky as I was to have this incredible academic advisor who took a great interest in all of his students. He didn't have children of his own, so I guess we were his kids. He was also an actor and a screenwriter.
Mhm.
And he, one of the 3 internships I had my senior year was at a talent agency. I thought my internship at the TV station was the direction I would go in, and that I would eventually write books for children on the side. And I still always knew I wanted to write. But I ended up having kind of a spidey sense for knowing who would get booked for film and TV. And so I was hired by the agency, and I stayed there for 7 years.
Wow.
And here's the nicest part of the story. My advisor became my talent. I was his agent
Oh,
for
wow.
film and TV. Yeah, which might have been his plan all along. Who knows?
And Alice
So
in Wonderland, where'd that come?
So Brawless in Wonderland is just a title that that I came up with because I always felt like that environment was a very, down the rabbit hole. It was a subculture. It was a kind of a place where both magical things and terrible things could happen, much like Hollywood, right? And there was a hotel at the time called the Delano Hotel, where the decor inside was meant to make you feel as if you were in the Looking Glass. You were in Alice in Wonderland. And so I kind of, all of those things swirled together in my mind. And that became sort of the running thread, thematically through the book. There were a lot of references to Alice in Wonderland. And of course, I had the Delano Hotel in the book.
Mhm.
And Brawless in Wonderland was a title that at the time, there was a trend of young adult books that were very much about accepting your body.
Mhm.
There was Unexpected Development by Marlene Perez, where a very large-breasted young woman was on the cover. There was Dorian Cerrone's book, Dancing in Red Shoes Will Kill You, which was about a ballerina having to accept her body type. And so Brawless in Wonderland kind of, I thought, fell into, and so did my editor and my agent, fell under that umbrella of those books celebrating different kinds of bodies and for teenage girls to feel confident. And I guess there was a shift from the time it was acquired to the time it launched, because there were a lot of schools and librarians who objected to the title, even though there's nothing objectionable in the book. There's no sex in the book. There's nothing, not that that should be objectionable. I applaud I think that young adults should absolutely include all of the things that kids are faced with. And that does include sex, of course. So, I mean, I just personally don't write that as well as those who do write it well. So I avoided that. Looking back now, I wouldn't title it Brawless in Wonderland, because I do think somehow the zeitgeist changed. And I was one of the last books to have an edgy title about body acceptance, and kind of hurt me.
I would still put the title. I think it's really, honestly, and one of the best titles out of all the books that I've seen, at this age range. A fantastic title. I always thought so. I wouldn't have changed it. So let's talk about your writing journey. How did you first go from writing that I want to do this like kind of as a hobby to getting published?
Well, I realized that I needed to know what I was doing. And I remember from my days at the agency, there had been this wonderful author named Barbara Parker. She was a murder mystery writer. And she came into the office and asked if anybody could give her some inside information for a book she was writing, set in the world of modeling and set in the world of South Beach. And everybody was so busy. It was in the middle of what we call season, where, I mean, really, if you imagine what it's like in those movies that show the stock market where everybody's screaming, bah, and everybody's really, really stressed, that's what a modeling and talent agency was in the 90s in South Beach in season. We were the #1 shooting location in the world at the time that I was there. And so it was really hectic and crazy. But because she was a published author, to me, she was basically like Mick Jagger, to me, it wasn't like now where you can just get on the internet and you can write to an author you like, or you can send them a message on social media. It was nothing like that. If you met a real live author, it was like, meeting an astronaut or something. So I met with her and we stayed in touch. She invited me to a luncheon given by her editor, and there were all these women there from the Florida romance writers. Well, I wasn't a romance writer, and I went to their conference just to know other authors, and that was my first time taking workshops given by authors, and my mind just went, I couldn't believe the amount of knowledge that I didn't know and what I needed to know. You know, it's very important that you understand what you don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was a lady there who had a book deal. I think it was a middle grade book that she had published years ago. She told me about SEBWI, and that's how I made my journey. Because I said, I really want to write young adults. She said, you're in the wrong place. This is where you go. And if I hadn't sat next to that lady, I don't know what would have happened, because I didn't know anyone at this conference except for Barbara Parker. She wasn't there at this other luncheon thing I went at, a second luncheon that I went to. So I had to walk up to a table of women and say, excuse me, is anybody sitting here? May I take this seat? I didn't know anyone. It just so happened that the woman next to me was also a young adult and middle grade author. Her name was Sarah Vinus.
And how'd you wind up getting an agent?
That was the best. I was very, very lucky. Very lucky. They had at our SCBWI conferences, the critique sessions where you turn in 10 pages and you either meet with another author, an agent, or an editor. And I was able to get a sit down with Stephen Chudney. And he said, I really like this. And he's an agent. He said, I really like this. Pitch your book to me. And I started talking and telling him all about Swimming with the Sharks, which was the YA I was working on. And he held up his hand. He said, you talk too much. And I said, I know. What can I do? And we started laughing. So we hit it off personality-wise, but that's not enough to sell a book. He wanted to see the rest of the book, but I only had 6 chapters written. So I quickly, as fast as I could, he asked for the first 3 chapters. I sent that in. I had 6 chapters written. He said, I want to see the rest of it. And I had to finish the book, send it in, and then I started working on Brawless in Wonderland after he signed me. Brawless in Wonderland sold about 18 months later, and then 2 weeks later, Swimming with the Sharks sold. Wow. So I had to do revisions on both books at the same time, and it gave me a lot of burnout after that. It was really hard to work on one book all day because I needed extensive revisions on Brawless in Wonderland. It was very much an adult book when I turned it in. There were a lot of things I couldn't put in there that had really happened, truly, but I couldn't.
How much after the Romance Writers Conference was this conference that you met Stephen and you?
It was a few years, because within that time, I left Dade County. I was living in Dade County at the time. Moved up to Delray Beach, got pregnant, got a teaching certificate, and switched careers from being an agent to a teacher. Worked for, I would say it was probably 5 years. Okay. Because while I was working as a teacher, I started attending conferences and taking workshops and all of that. So I would say it was 4 to 5 years after that.
That's for some people, I think, who have the writing ability. That seems to be the average to me. That it seems like that you first start going to landing an agent at 5-year range. It seems to be that.
Well, I think it's not just writing ability, though. It's also the know-how to understand who you're writing for, to take the workshops given by authors, agents, and editors so that you know what to do and what not to do. I was doing a lot of things wrong. Right. So, yeah.
I know that feeling. But let's move on to the Jewish aspect and conferences, especially being Jewish in the writing community in general, and Kidlit in particular. And going to conference, that's how I first met you at a conference. I don't know if you remember all the things, but we were talking and we did a little pitch session, and we had to talk about our book, and you were nice enough, and I didn't know you at all. You were nice enough at my very first conference to come over to me afterwards and talk to me about, Jewish things. And that's how I met you. And I thought it was so sweet that someone actually came over to me afterwards, and because I was nervous as hell, my first one going to. And
I don't remember this at all. Oh my goodness.
Yes, and you were nice enough to come over to me after, because I was talking about the Golem book that I had then, and you started talking about Jewish things in Kidlit. So that was very nice. So what does it feel like now to be a Jew in Kidlit? Because it's a lot of feelings involved with it for me too. And I see just behind you the coming of age book that you were so nice enough to work on, in the anthology. even the Kirkus Review said, like, presumed white, like, right, we're Jewish, and that's the problem. To me, a lot of this stuff is that that's putting in there instead of just being Jewish. It's this whole oppressor-oppressed view of the world instead of, Jews are always in one category to this right now. So how do you feel about this right now?
My bigger problem, first, let's start with the Kirkus Review. And no, let's even back up more. I need to thank you because I was retiring from children's books completely. I saw you at a conference. I had a terrible cold.
Yes, I remember that.
I was getting up to walk out. I said, I think I'm done. I think I'm done, because it was a diversity panel that we were watching, and Jewish authors and Jewish books were not mentioned. We were completely erased from the conversation. And there was just this feeling came over me that we just don't have a seat at the table at this particular time. And I felt that for all this talk of inclusion, there was a lot of hypocrisy. So I started to walk out, and you said, I'm doing an anthology. And I thought, and you told me about it, and I thought, well, this is something, maybe I'm not retiring then, because I'd really like to be a part of this. I didn't even give it a second thought. So I, first of all, want to thank you for that. The biggest problem I had with the Kirkus Review was that the takeaway the reviewer said, and we all had to speak to each other who were the authors of it to decide if we wanted to call attention to this or not. But since you brought it up and some time has gone by and it's now in paperback, I think it's worth mentioning that the reviewer said, this book is only good for Jewish kids.
Fine, yes.
The takeaway was, if you're not Jewish,
no interest.
Don't even bother with this book. I cannot imagine a reviewer saying that. We're at an anthology centered on any other marginalized group.
100%, 100%, yeah.
And and so we decided we didn't want to call attention to a negative review, and nothing. But because of that, also, I wonder if we made the right choice, because especially what we're seeing now, in terms of sweeping generalizations made about Jewish books and Jewish authors, lists that are going on that, where the word Jew is replaced by the word Zionist.
Right. That's always, that's the easy way out. Right. We know you mean Jew. Just, I put that on Twitter, actually, like, we know you mean Jew. Just go ahead and say it, because it's less for you to type. It's Zionist. So we know you mean it anyway. Just use it.
Right. Exactly. So that's the bad news. Is when people ask about our October 7th, my bigger concern is what happened October 8th.
Yeah.
It didn't start October 8th, but it sure came out from under the rock. The dragon is awake, it's like the train has left the station, however you want to say it, it's out, it's overt. And there's no shame in it. People are just, so that's the good news, is that I think we're refusing to be quiet. And I think Jewish authors are a lot more vocal now about writing Jewish characters, writing Jewish books, amplifying Jewish publishers. And there's been a lot of connection that I did not have in the previous years, when some of us, like you and I and other Jewish authors in the Whisper networks, were mentioning things like, oh, this editor wants me to change the last name of my character because it's too Jewish.
I've been told that too. I was typically told that, this is too Jewish, it won't sell.
And this was not since October 7th or October 8th. This was 10 years ago. And then again, a few years later, or another author saying to me, my editor really shocked me because I had the word God, and she said that she didn't think Jews believed in God. Or sometimes even more astonishing is these comments are coming from Jewish agents or Jewish editors or other Jewish professionals.
That drives me crazy the most, because it's capitulating to a mob, really, and we have to be seen as the good Jews. We have to be seen as like, we're placating everyone else. And I see that on social media all the time too. And, I'm not going to mention names. You and I talked about this before we came on today. There's only, even now, there's only so much, we're willing to go to, we can, to talk about. And so I see people that, you and I have talked about it. I see people as, people that we considered friends who are, pushing like these anti-Semitic libels or tropes on social media. And also I see a lot of the, I'm the good Jew. I'm not with them, kind of thing.
Right.
Please like me, kind of thing.
You're still Jewish enough for the bad guys.
Yes,
That's what
exactly.
they don't get. Yeah.
You're never going, if you're playing that game, you're not going to win that game,
Right.
So, and
Right.
it's frustrating, it's appalling, and, just infuriating to see people that you consider friends doing this. And also the other way, the I'm the good Jew, the as a Jew person, they don't speak for me kind of thing.
And well, that's why I think the anthology Coming of Age was so wonderful, because instead of posting on social media, getting into heated arguments, name calling, pointing the finger, we put out this, and you were the mastermind behind it, you and Henry, and you put out this anthology where, for example, the stereotype that all Jews are wealthy and throw these huge bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs that are, extravagant. Almost every other story in the anthology, based on true stories of the authors, were about the budget they were given. There's one that takes place in a parking lot, the story. And I think that's very clear that so many Jewish people work in education or social work and all kinds of things. There's this stereotype about them all being wealthy, and I feel that we can make an impact with our stories. And I do believe, because Jewish authors are now all connecting with each other and speaking about with the situation, that good will come from it. And it's already starting. For example, the organization that I'm in, an organization called the Artists Against Antisemitism, that was formed.
I was going to ask about that.
Last October. Yeah. And it's all Jewish women authors founded it. I was the very last founding member asked to join. So I feel very, very honored. And we're doing a lot of good. We're fighting the good fight, raising a lot of money in a short period of time for people who really want to help. We did an auction, and even after we closed the auction, people continue to donate to fight hatred. So,
and what kind of things do they do? What kind of things does the organization do?
Well, the first thing we did was an auction that raised, I think the number was $120,594 in 1 week to go to Project Shema, which is a fantastic organization that seeks to build bridges and understanding and provide education on college campuses, not only for the students, but for the faculty, which is sorely needed right now. They don't only go to college campuses, but I do believe that was the focus of where our auction money went, which is highly timely and relevant right now with what's going on the college campuses.
Mm-hmm. So, that I've seen too. The you know how people stand on Jews with pretty much how they're portraying the terrorist-loving college campus riots and the protests and rallies. You see that when everyone's like, again, screaming the word the Zionists. We're not against the Jews, we're against the Zionists. You kind of know how that person feels, and it's really disappointing. People that, and
I do have to say this though. I actually know, because I have spoken to people who aren't Jewish whose kids are actually, I do know somebody whose kid was in one of the encampments.
Yeah.
She explained to me, they're very earnest. They really do care about changing the world for the better. They just don't have all the information.
Right.
And another thing is too, a lot of these kids really, they're going to go towards the love. So if there's a group of people saying, hey, we're all about good and changing the world for the better, come and be with us, hang out with us. We're going to be your good friend. We're going to support each other and for this cause that's greater than ourselves. And I think that they're being misled by a lot of people, and we know there's outside people involved in it. Yes. So I don't want to paint all the protesters with the exact same brush. There are
I'll agree with you to a point. At some point, you can go in with the best intentions. At some point, you see what they're doing to Jewish students.
Right.
At some point,
exactly.
you hear.
And if you hear that, yes, if you hear some of the things they're saying, if you hear them saying Intifada now
Right.
and kill all the Jews,
Yes.
at
And
that
you're
point,
still there.
say, maybe I better pack up my stuff and leave. This isn't what I came here for. Absolutely.
Exactly it. So you can go in with all the intentions, but at some point the other side comes out. And if you're still there, like, well, when they say death to Jews, they don't really mean that. Yeah. I mean, what are you doing there?
Exactly. Well, I'm very glad we're having this conversation, because I don't necessarily agree with you, Jonathan, on everything. You don't always agree with
Yes.
me. We have conversations about all kinds of things.
Correct.
My problem with circling back to Jewish authors in Kidlit is that I feel we're all in bubbles right now when we should be talking to each other. But the problem is Jewish authors have not been included with a seat at the table to even have the conversation.
That's
What
exactly
did we
right.
do? We created our own sort of, support groups, if you will, and we call each other and we text each other. And people, I think, are silent on social media for two reasons. Number one, they're afraid it's going to hurt their
Yeah.
career.
Right.
They're not necessarily wrong. And they're afraid of saying the wrong thing, making a false move, taking a wrong step. And the second reason they're not saying anything is because they truly don't understand.
Yeah.
They just don't understand. Or maybe there's a third reason that, they take action in other ways, like I did with joining or founding Artists Against Antisemitism, because that way actively raising money to fight hatred felt more effective in making change than just posting my anger on social media. So everybody does what they are comfortable with. And
Correct.
I think there are a lot of people who are very uncomfortable with posting, but I will say it hurts. It's shocking to see.
I've already crossed that line.
Yeah, it's hurtful that there is so much. I don't necessarily think it's always indifference. At first I thought it was indifference, but now I think either they secretly don't agree with what's going on and they're afraid to say anything, or maybe they do agree and just don't want to get involved. They just want to stay completely professional about books and nothing else. So
have a lot of friends reached out to you privately?
I wouldn't say a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember each and every one who did.
Me too. Same ones. Same thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say a lot, but you know what it meant? It meant a lot. It really meant a lot. People that I hadn't even heard from in a long time.
Awesome.
And I also understand people are very protective of their brand. I do get that. But if you had protested about other things before and now you're silent,
that's exactly it.
Inconsistent. Right. If you always were just keeping with your brand and your aesthetic and the way your page looks, I do understand that. I get all that, but I agree. I also understand if you feel like posting is a complete waste of your time and it upsets you so much, you'd rather just go volunteer or go to an event, or do an anti-Semitic organization to fight anti-Semitism, or write a book about it.
Yeah.
I understand there are different ways to handle it. So,
it's like I said, I agree with all that, but I mostly agree with the other part. If you've been virtue signaling in the past, all these issues are wrong, but then now you're quiet.
Right.
You lose all credibility in my
and we know where you stand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So no, I want to thank you so much, and this has been such a treat and pleasure to get to speak with you like this. I know we've spoken many times, and again, we've spoken about this through, like you mentioned, the Whisper Network, and with a lot of other Jewish authors as well. But I'm glad that we got to speak about this today like this.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to hear all your podcasts, watch all of your podcasts, and we're going to log out, and then we're going to go, we didn't talk about this.
Well, I have so much to talk about, but I'm not going to keep you forever. Right? A lot of these
I have to pick up my car. It's being fixed.
That's exactly why. Yes.
Right. And also, say the name of your podcast again.
So again, this has been Did You Know? I'm Jonathan Rosen, and again, a very special thanks to Debbie Reed Fischer. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Did You Know, where all items used were strictly kosher.